Good day, everyone. My name is Louise Dayne Patio, and today I'll be presenting a comparative analysis of the state's role in employment relations across two of the world's leading economies, the United States of America and Australia. These two countries represent fundamentally different philosophies on how governments should engage with the world of work. The USA leans towards a voluntary, market driven approach, while Australia has developed one of the most comprehensive legislative employment systems in the OECD. Over the next 15 minutes, I will walk you through four core areas: the nature of each state's role, their institutional frameworks, the impact on stakeholders, and finally, future trends with evidence based recommendations. Here is a quick overview of what we'll cover. We'll begin with why these two countries were selected and why their governments actually do in employment relations. We'll then examine the institutional frameworks, the laws, agencies, and regulatory bodies. Third, we'll look at how all this affects workers and employers. And we'll close it with future trends, recommendations, and reference lists. This presentation draws on peer-reviewed scholarship, government reports, and legislative sources, all published between 2020 and 2026. So why the USA and Australia? The selection is deliberate. As Kaufman of 2020 notes, meaningful comparative analysis requires countries with sufficiently distinct employment relation systems to reveal structural differences rather than superficial variations. The United States operates what scholars call a liberal market economy. It is characterized by employment at will doctrine, decentralized firm level bargaining, and historical low union density, sitting at approximately 10.1% in 2023 according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Australia, by contrast, operates a coordinated market economy with active state involvement. The Fair Work Act of 2009 serves as the cornerstone, underpinned by the National Employment Standards, a set of 11 minimum entitlements that apply to virtually all employees nationally. Critically, both countries have experienced major policy shifts between 2020 and 2026, making them a live laboratory for understanding how political change reshapes employment law. We have Biden's pro-labor agenda in the USA, followed by Trump's regulatory rollback from 2025, and Albanese's significant reform agenda in Australia from 2022 and onwards. Let's begin with the USA. The cornerstone of US employment law is actually quite old. The National Labor Relations Act of 1935, which established collective bargaining rights and created the National Labor Relations Board. Yet the federal minimum wage has remained frozen at mere $7.25 per hour since 2009, creating significant inequality across the country. The Biden administration attempted to reshape the landscape significantly. Executive Order 14026 raised the minimum wage for federal contractors to $17.75 per hour by 2024. The PRO Act, which would have substantially strengthened union rights, passed the House of Representatives, was stalled in the Senate. Perhaps the most significant recent development is the reversal under the Trump administration from early 2025, including executive orders dismantling federal DEI mandates and a significant weakening of NLRB enforcement capacity. This political volatility is itself a defining feature of the US system. Three statistics capture the landscape. Union density is just 10.1%, the federal minimum wage remains $7.25, and 26 states have enacted the right to work laws that restrict union security agreements. Australia presents a strikingly different picture. The Fair Work Act of 2009 provides a unified national framework for employment relations, administered by the Independent Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman. The national employment standards provide every employee with 11 minimum entitlements, from annual leave, personal leave, and parental leave to notice periods and protection from unfair dismissal. These cannot be contracted away. The Albanese government, elected in 2022, has been the most legislatively active government on employment since the Fair Work Act itself. The Secure Jobs Better Pay Act of 2022 introduced multi-employer bargaining. The Closing Loophole Acts of 2023 and 2024 introduced the landmark right to disconnect, new casual conversion rights, protection for labor hire workers, and new employee-like worker categories for gig workers. The Fair Work Commission's 2024 annual wage review awarded a 3.75% increase to the national minimum wage, bringing it to $23.23 per hour, equivalent to approximately $15.30 US dollars, among the highest minimum wages in the developed world. Australia maintains 121 modern awards covering specific industry, creating a detailed wage floor system. Turning to institutional frameworks. In the United States, four key institutions shape employment relations. First is National Labor Relations Board, the LRLB. This independent federal agency administers the NLRA, investigates unfair labor practices, and oversees union certifications elections. Under the Biden era, the NLRB expanded the Joint Employer Standard in 2023 through the SAMIX decision. Under the Trump from 2025, there has been a substantial rollback of NLRB enforcement capacity. Second, the Department of Labor enforces the Fair Labor Standards Act and the Family and Medical Leave Act. A key Biden era reform was the proposed overtime salary threshold increase. This was contested in federal courts, illustrating the legislated nature of the U.S. employment regulations. Third, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission enforces anti-discrimination laws, the ADA, and the Anti-Discrimination in Employment Act. The EEOC has increasingly focused on AI-related discrimination in hiring since 2023. And four, state labor agencies add another layer. California's minimum wage is $16 per hour, and New York's equivalent create a patchwork of protections that can be complex for multi-state employers. This dual federal-state structure is defining and often challenging feature of the US system. Australia's institutional architecture is notably more integrated. The Fair Work Commission is the centerpiece, an independent national tribunal that sets minimum wages through annual reviews, approves enterprise agreements, and mediates industrial disputes. Unlike any equivalent in the US, the FWC provides ongoing institutional continuity that transcends political cycles. The Fair Work Ombudsman serves as the enforcement arm, investigating wage theft and non-compliance landmark cases against 7-Eleven franchises and Woolworths, where systematic underpayment was found, drove significant systematic reforms in payroll auditing and corporate accountability. Safe Work Australia coordinates the National Work Health and Safety Framework. A major development since 2023 has been the introduction of mandatory obligations on employers to proactively identify and manage psychosocial hazards, that is, mental health risks in the workplace. This represents a paradigm shift from reactive to preventive safety governance. Finally, the Australian Human Rights Commission enforces anti-discrimination legislation. Critically, the 2022 amendments to the Sex Discriminations Act introduced a positive duty, meaning employers must proactively prevent sexual harassment rather than simply respond to complaints. This is a world-leading standard. Let us now examine the impact of stakeholders, beginning with workers. In terms of job security, The contrast is stark. US workers operate under employment at will in most states. They can be dismissed for any reason or no reason, unless protected by specific laws. Australian workers, after a qualifying period, have access to unfair dismissal protections through the Fair Work Commission. On wages, as discussed, the gap is significant. The stagnant US federal minimum reflects the political gridlock around wages, while Australia's regular FWC wage reviews ensure workers' wages keep pace with cost of living increases. Critically, wage theft is now a criminal offense across all Australian states. Perhaps the most striking difference is leave entitlements. The United States is the only OECD nation with no federal paid parental leave entitlement. Australia's government-funded paid parental leave schemes provides 18 weeks and has been extended by the Albanese government. For gig economy workers, arguably the most contested frontier, Australia has taken decisive legislation action. The Closing Loopholes Act of 2024 created an employee-like worker category, allowing platform workers to access minimum standards through the FWC. The USA remains fragmented, with California's AB 5 in conflict with federal approaches and Uber's lobbying successfully, defeating state level protections in multiple jurisdictions. This slide compares six key dimensions of workplace dynamics side by side. On industrial disputes, the USA allows employers to permanently replace striking workers, a powerful disincentive to strike action. Australia's protected industrial action framework provides a more balanced processes. On the gig economy, I've already discussed Australia's legislative response. The USA fragmented approach has left millions of platform workers in legal limbo. Australia's right to disconnect, effective from August 2024 under the Closing Loopholes Act, is particularly noteworthy. It gives workers the legal right to refuse contact outside working hours without facing disciplinary consequences. The USA has no equivalent federal provision. On pay equity, both countries continue to wrestle with gender pay gaps. Australia's 2024 aged care workers case, where the FWC awarded a 15% wage increase to a predominantly female workforce, represents one of the most significant pay statistics, also reveal the two systems' different approaches. Australia recorded 169 work-related fatalities in 2023, while the USA recorded 5,486 in 2022, a proportionally far higher rate, even adjusting for population size. Looking ahead, four major trends are reshaping employment relations in both countries. First, artificial intelligence and automation governance. The OECD has flagged AI-driven hiring, performance management, and redundancy decisions as a critical emerging risk. Australia's FWC has begun monitoring AI use in bargaining, while the US EEOC has issued guidance on AI discrimination. But neither country has yet enacted comprehensive AI employment legislation. Second, remote and hybrid work. Both countries are developing frameworks around remote work entitlements, home office safety obligations, and the right to request flexibility. Australians' 2022 reforms to the right to request flexible work represents a significant step. Third, the green jobs transition. Australia's net zero legislation and the USA's Inflation Reduction Act both create significant clean energy employment opportunities. But managing the transition to displace fossil fuels workers requires proactive labor market policy. Fourth, supply chain labor standards, increasingly important in a globalized economy. Australia's Modern Slavery Act of 2018 is being reviewed for stronger mandatory due diligence obligations, a move ahead of the USA's more sector specific approach. Based on this analysis, I offer four targeted recommendations. For the USA, recommendation 1: enact federal paid leave and raise the federal minimum wage to at least $15 per hour, indexed to inflation. The OECD 2023 highlights the USA as a clear outlier on both measures among peer economies. Recommendation 2: for the USA, pass key elements of the PRO Act to strengthen collective bargaining rights. The evidence from Bivens and colleagues is compelling. Higher union density consistently correlates with lower income inequality. For Australia, recommendation 3: proactively legislate around AI in employment. The FWC should be implicitly empowered to hear disputes arising from algorithmic management, and disclosure requirements should be mandatory when AI is used in hiring or performance decisions. Recommendation 4 for Australia: increase Fair Work Ombudsman resourcing and introduce mandatory payroll reporting for business with 50 or more employees, targeting the highest risk sectors for wage theft. Clement Wright of 2022 found that wage theft disproportionately affects vulnerable workers, particularly in hospitality and agriculture. A critical reflection is essential to demonstrate depth of analysis. First, is more regulation always better? Australia's comprehensive system delivers stronger baseline protections, but it can also reduce flexibility and create barriers for small business. The USA's voluntarism approach generates labor market dynamism but perpetuates structural inequality. As Dunlop's seminal systems theory of 1958 reminds us, no single model is universal optimal. It is shaped by society's history, power dynamics, and economic structure. Second, both countries demonstrate the profound political contingency of employment relations. Biden's pro-labor reforms were substantially reversed within weeks of Trump's return to office in 2025. This political volatility underscores the value of independent institutions like Australia's Fair Work Commission that provide continuity beyond electoral cycles. Third, the gig economy is the defining structural test of our era. Australia's 2024 legislative response, while imperfect, is more decisive than the USA's fragmented state. By the state approach, this suggests that institutional capacity and willingness to legislate matters as much as political intention. In conclusion, this comparative analysis reveals that the USA and Australia represent two distinct and coherent approaches to state involvement in employment relations. Both have strengths and weaknesses. Neither is simply superior. Australia's integrated legislative model offers workers stronger and more consistent protections. The USA's voluntarism model offers greater flexibility but allows significant inequality to persist. Both nations face the same frontier challenges: AI governance, platform work, climate transition, and remote work. The most effective future systems will be those that draw lessons from each other. Australia's institutional stability, legislative ambitions paired with USA's dynamism. Thank you for your attention. I am happy to take any questions. And here are my references that I've used.